Hey, this is Troy from Cube Dweller Fitness, and today I've got Matthew Palfrey with me from Brute Force Europe. So welcome, Matthew.
Hey Troy, how are you?
I'm doing pretty good. We're on Skype today, and so hopefully we can talk across different sides of the planet and have this, really flatten the globe and talk. And so kind of cool to meet with you this way, Matthew.
Yeah, no, it's good to meet you too. The joys of technology.
Yeah. I ran across Matthew on LinkedIn on one of the groups with health and fitness. And so, Matthew, why don't we start off with just a little bit of background and just tell us where you came from and how you got involved in sandbags and fitness and how we crossed paths.
Well, I've been coaching for about 15 years now. I graduated with a degree in biomechanics over here in the UK. So, coaching and biomechanical coaching is really where my passion is, looking at someone, looking at them move, and then trying to make corrective suggestions for better movement patterns.
Sure.
Which is a bit of a niche in fitness generally. I don't think a lot of people do biomechanics or are passionate about biomechanics.
Yeah. And I can see how it could be so key to get the movements right.
I think it's important. I think, as fitness is a highly commercial thing now, I think it's important that as coaches, we can look at new modalities and new tools that still apply those same fundamental coaching practices to them. And I think biomechanics is a really valuable, powerful tool to do that.
Yeah. I don't want to go off on a bunny trail tangent too far, but I just got some different shoes, some more minimalist shoes. And okay. Watching and thinking about the biomechanics of my stride and foot placement and everything else. And so I can, all sorts of questions are coming to mind that would be fun to go off and talk for a long time about that. But what is one area where you've really used that focus on biomechanics in your coaching that you've enjoyed the most?
Well, I do a lot of work in healthcare as well. So I work for one of the big private healthcare companies over here in Europe.
Okay.
And that's typically most of my work there is in rehab. Mm-hmm. So joint replacements are the main thing that I do at the moment. And being able to take someone from not being able to move, not being able to stand up, not being able to walk,
wow,
and trying to work around clearly quite a big problem.
Yeah,
is
monumental.
Really rewarding. And I think, as coaches, we're always going to be dealing with people who want to lose weight and improve their strength. That's the global thing. But I think with rehab and taking people on that journey from not being able to move to being able to move and enjoy life, I think that's where biomechanics has been most useful and most rewarding, I think, for me.
That would be really cool, especially as you think of some of the extremes where you talked about those huge challenges where they can hardly even move at all, and then you get them up and moving. That's got to be great.
Yeah.
All right, we're back. So Matthew and I, we met online on LinkedIn, of all places. You think of the different social networks: Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google+. But we met on one of the health and fitness groups on LinkedIn. And what caught my eye, Matthew, was sandbags. And so why don't you tell me a little bit of background about either LinkedIn or sandbags?
Well, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. I think it's a good network for professionals. And there's a good health and fitness gathering on there. And some of the groups, some quite focused discussions that go on there. So I think it's the internet, so the quality of the information is variable.
Yeah, your mileage may vary, right?
Yeah, but I think LinkedIn for health and fitness professionals is a good spot. And the sandbag thing, I mean, I almost fell into it by accident, really. I've been training with sandbags off and on for a few years, just at the gym. But I had spent a year or so. I was lucky enough to take a year out in 2009 nice. took a year off, went traveling through South Africa and Asia and Australia.
Wow.
With a girlfriend. It's really nice, good to recharge the batteries.
Yeah.
And when I got back to the UK, we came back and didn't have much time. I had to really plow back into work fairly heavily. So I was just thinking of ways that I could get training again, and train properly. We had some garage space. I got hold of a couple of just builders' bags of sand, and it went from there really. And it wasn't long before I started to think, hang on, there's some real mileage here in this. And from there, then I started looking into the custom-made sandbags and just developing things that way. And the blog that I started really was there just to support that journey. And it's still to this day, I think, a personal blog. Even though we have a 1,000 followers or something now, it's just me lifting sand in the garage. And I make no apology for being quite upfront about that. And if people want to join me, albeit online, then they can. And I'll give people as much advice and feedback as I can.
Nice. There's part of that story that, as you talked about biomechanics, falling into something just kind of made me chuckle. But I think that's someone looking at the details of movement, tripping over something. But that's how my brain works. I think that's another thing that it really attracted me to your site and some of your information, because I think we share that common, here's a side adventure, here's what I'm doing to get in shape. And that's really where Cube Dweller Fitness started too. It's me looking for space out in the garage or garage to find a way in the limited amount of time and space when I've got a full-time job and other stresses of life to get in shape. And you find some unique equipment. And so you found sandbags, you started looking at ways that you could start with your own. And then tell me about Brute Force.
So Brute Force Sandbags, obviously based in Colorado, saw what I was doing, and bizarrely, still now I'm one of the few dedicated kind of sandbag lifting sites on the internet, which I just find is crazy, because I don't do anything special, but it's a really cheap, easy way for people to get training. But he found the site and sent me over some sandbags and said, look, try them out. I know you're used to training with homemade stuff, but give these a go, see what you think. And I love the bags. They worked, as much as any bag of sand can work, really hard wearing.
Yep.
I could load this thing up to nearly 60 kilos. So, well over 100 pounds. And that for me was important as well, to have that, progression in what I was doing. And we just kind of hit it off from there. And about 6 months after that point, we looked into kind of developing things over here in Europe. And Brute Force Sandbags then kind of moved into Brute Force Europe.
Nice.
So we're the official UK and Europe distributor for sandbags.
Cool. And how long ago was that they found your site and sent you those demo products to try out?
That was about 18 months ago now.
Okay.
So I've been road testing these bags for the last 18 months, and I probably get in at least 3 to 4 sandbag training workouts per week with the bags. So and to this point, we had no rips, no tears, no leakage. That's
saying a lot
in sandbag lifting. Yeah,
that's saying an awful lot.
Yeah, so I'm pretty happy with the products, and happy to kind of recommend them through my blog.
Yeah.
But again, on that note, I always make it clear on the blog that you don't have to invest in these things. Mm-hmm. There are other options out there. It's the key thing for me is that people are moving and training, and if they can get hold of a bag of sand that costs them nothing or a couple of dollars, that's a great starting point.
Exactly. Get started some way.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's one of the things on Cube Dweller Fitness that I aim to help people with, and have got some exciting feedback where people have really just realized that I just have to get moving somehow,
Yeah.
some way, regularly. And it's fun to find things like sandbags, or, you know, you and I have talked a little bit about Bulgarian bags, where I've started kind of along the same line. How can you start cheaply? And then what are some options as you decide this is a methodology or a form of fitness that I enjoy and works well? What other options are there? And so sounds like you've done the same thing with Brute Force. But let's talk a little bit more about sandbags and how you think they fit into, you know, if you think of a fitness arsenal, you know, the number of different things we can do for fitness. Where do you think sandbags really fit? Who's kind of the ideal user of sandbags?
Well, I think in terms of the broader spectrum of fitness and different tools and modalities.
So how do you think sandbags fit in if you think of all the different ways we can train, the different equipment I can use? You know, why pick sandbags, and who do you think it's ideal for?
Well, I think the sandbag, generally speaking, is this odd-shaped object. You know, it's not going to cooperate with you when you try and lift it,
Sure.
like a barbell and a dumbbell.
Yeah.
So, you know, for absolute strength, you know, people who want to be able to lift as much weight as they can and work on strength goals, lift more on a sandbag than you can on a barbell. So I make that point quite clear. But for, you know, this whole odd-shaped object lifting goals, so stabilizing muscles, the ability to be able to lift something that is almost real world. It's not too dissimilar from another person. So you get transfers into contact sports, rugby, American football, MMA, jiu-jitsu, judo, wrestling, those kind of sports as a carryover.
Yeah.
In terms of ideal user, I think, I mean, anyone who wants to train at home, garage gym enthusiasts, those kind of people, it's an easy tool to use and an affordable tool to use for those people. But in truth, you know, my blog at the moment has a fairly even split between male and female. And the age range is anywhere from kind of 18 up to 54, something like that, I think is the oldest person I know that regularly follows the workouts.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah, I think, I mean, I don't like to call things functional because I don't think it really means much. But if function for you is to be able to lift an object as opposed to something fixed resistance or something that's going to cooperate with you, then I think the sandbag fits in fairly well there. I mean, biomechanically, we would talk about stabilizing muscles and all those other things, but I think from a simple, straightforward, bare bones approach, that would be the best user, I think, for the bag.
Yeah. Yeah, I struggle with the term functional. There's a number of times I find myself wanting to use it, but I feel like it's been overused a lot in the fitness circles. But
yeah.
The thing that I like about, you know, the sandbag modality is that it is really applicable to a number of things that just happen in life. You got to pick up your child, you got to pick up the groceries, you got to pick up other things, and often they're odd shaped, and they don't really want to cooperate, right?
I mean, there's a few other you know, key benefits, I suppose, to the sandbag. If you're using a handleless bag, you know, there's a lot that happens there when you don't have a nice handle to hold on to.
Sure.
You have to grip the bag, and that's something a lot of people don't ever really do when they're training. I mean, I know a lot of people that use fixed resistance machines, and you can have an open grip on those things, and it just sits in the palm of the hand, and you can press it.
Yeah, your fingers aren't doing anything, are they?
Yeah, and you give someone an actual weight that they have to hold on to. Most people get sore hands pretty quickly because they're just not conditioned to do it.
Yeah.
But it's, you know, not a bad thing at all. generally in real life, I mean, lots of things obviously have handles, and that's a fact of life now. Things are made fairly easy for us to lift. But I think when you've got something that doesn't have hold of this thing, you can't help but develop a strong grip. It's not an additional thing at the end of a session where you do some grip work. It's right there in the session. It's done. At the end of the session, if you can't grip the thing, you can't lift it.
Yeah.
And I think anything like that where you're forcing people to again, going back, multifaceted, and there's lots of benefits coming through it, I think is a really good.
All right, so you were talking about sandbags being an odd-shaped object and how that really affects people's grip. Let's talk some more about that.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things about sandbags is without a strong grip, you really can't train with these things. And on the face of it, that puts a lot of people off, because it's not necessarily a thing that you can lift the same weight with that you could with a fixed resistance or a barbell or a dumbbell. And people think, well, if I'm going down in weight, this is a bad thing. But I think that the fact that it will naturally build up your grip, it's a good thing. It's a really sandbags is that they're malleable. They will move and they will bend around your body, which is something actually that isn't really focused on so much when people talk about sandbag lifting. But for people that don't like a bar across cervical vertebrae, people that have problems across the back of the shoulders, a sandbag will fit fairly comfortably across there.
Yep.
Hill sprints, load carries, popping it over the shoulder is a bit more comfortable, perhaps not fitness wise, but actually more comfortable than having a barbell or a dumbbell just sat on the shoulder. So there's lots of practical applications for the sandbag.
And I think that word fits better, practical instead of functional, like we were talking about before. I think of the different side projects or just things taking care of the house or working around outside. There's not a lot of those things mimic grabbing a barbell and carrying it around. But I can see how they mimic grabbing a sandbag, right?
Yeah, and I think, I'm always keen to stress that absolutely, heavy lifting on something that wants to be lifted like a barbell is a good thing to have. But then I think making sure that you can practically apply that strength in real world situations, that the sandbag sits in that category nicely.
Nice. Well, we've talked a lot about brute force. We've talked about your blog. We've talked about how it builds grip and just some practical ways, not functional, but practical ways sandbag fits into training. How can people get started?
Okay.
All right, we've talked a lot about sandbags and grip strength and how it really builds some practical fitness that we can just apply as we go through life. And you've talked about brute force and how even after 18 months of pounding on these sandbags, they're still holding up. How can people get started, Matthew, if they want to try out some sandbags and get some more information?
Well, I think the key thing is that anyone can get themselves a sandbag, a very cheap, basic sandbag. And I started with a bag of builder's sand.
That's it.
A polyurethane bag of sand. It costs. I duct taped up the holes. There are a couple of air holes in the bag. Duct tape those up, and that's what I started with.
Nice.
No excuses for most people. And 25 kilos is a reasonable weight. Cut the bag, take some out, duct tape it down, and seal it up again. That's a great, straightforward good starting point for most people. We post 2 to 3 workouts a week normally, and people can follow those along. They can email me directly. They can watch my video fields just to try and get some more information. And I've got a free sandbag training manual as well,
Nice.
and a paid bigger one. So there's lots of options there for people to get involved.
Cool. And we'll put links down in the description of the video. If you click on the blog post that goes along with this, we'll have resources for Matthew's blog, his free ebook, and links for his product as well. So that's great. I sure hope we're able to stitch this together, Matthew. There's Skype has been a challenge, but I hope we can pull this together in a way that it doesn't really look too choppy. But I want to thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to speak with me about Brute Force Sandbags and Brute Force Europe.
No, it was great. Thank you, Troy.